You know, high up there, mountain high. All right, so welcome everybody. For the next hour or so, I'm going to talk with you. And we're going to go over a few things related to one of my favorite subjects. Might not be yours, but one of my favorite subjects, cybersecurity. And if I can get technology to work here, we'll be good to go. All right, so like I said, I'm going to spend the next hour or so talking to you about cybersecurity, specifically how it relates to schools and school breach. Let me put a little preface to what's going on here. I'm an ops guy, which means that I do cybersecurity as a business process. I don't get as involved in the way a lot of the student and your relationships are with the rest of FSA or the department. I know a lot about it. Been in the department now 6 years. Been in this job for 22 months specifically. So we're going to focus on a couple of things, mainly what's happened since last year's conference. If you attended last year's conference, we had a couple of cybersecurity sessions by some other folks. Last year was my first year attending. And we went over a lot of subjects. As a result of that, a lot of new initiatives came out of it. And even more powerful is a lot of schools are starting to talk with me and my team, which is fantastic. I want to have those conversations. Some housekeeping stuff before we really get into this presentation. At the end, I'm going to give you about 15, 20 minutes. I want to make sure I get question time. For those that were in the risk forum that just occurred last hour, somehow I got drafted to do the answers to the questions for a lot of that, but these will be just me. I do want to make sure that you know that in A306, tomorrow and the next day, I will have open time. That'll be time I'm available to answer additional questions. You come in, chat with me, whatever we need to do. So the times are in your, if you have the FSA app for the conference, there's a cybersecurity button on there on the second page. That lists the times. But just so you know, tomorrow is from 10:15 to 11:30, and then again at 1:45 to 3. And then on Wednesday, I'll be in there from 8 to 11 and 3 to 4. And as I understand it, the room is kind of hard to find. So you may have to look a little hard for it. It's back in, around the corner, through a hallway type room. But I will be there doing something. So come join me. I'll appreciate it. And also, I highly encourage you to attend session 28, which is the protecting financial data through cyber and fraud risk identification, and session 34, internal and external threats facing Title IV institutions. One task risk, and then the other is the IG team. The three of these are woven together. So we talk risk at a big perspective. I hit you with some ops things, then the IG comes in and talks about fraud and stuff they do. When it flows from me to the IG usually. IG does discover stuff and flows back to me. So there's a relationship there, and you'll see that woven into some of the things we talk about today. It will be death by PowerPoint. I figured everyone else had a lot of slides. I needed 112, so I won't have to talk at all. And if you believe that, you definitely do not know me. I think I have 12 slides. So the question a lot of you are going to be asking is, who is this guy and why is he up here? Well, it was luck, I guess. I've been in the federal government about 34 years, between my military time and as a civilian, both at the Department of Defense Agency and then Department of Education. 19 years of that I've been dealing with this thing called cybersecurity now. It used to be called information assurance, information security, so those folks that are aware of that stuff in the history. So I spent a lot of time in this business. And across the stuff I've seen and done has provided me with a wealth of knowledge that I'm applying now to federal student aid. A little bit different for me. I'm not dealing specifically with, a DoD customer, for example. But it's got a lot of similarity, and we'll talk about some of those things as we go through here. Let me throw out some statistics so that we can keep these in mind as we go forward here. In 2017, we paid out, and you saw some of these this morning, we let out $120 billion in school loans to 13 million students. If you think about it, though, that's a drop in the bucket compared to that $1.5 trillion that the Secretary talked about. Okay? It is an impact. It's an increase. And every year we see an increase. And if we're increasing the number of students we're going to continue to increase the amount of information we have to control and protect. And that's the very difficult part of this whole thing. It's all about the data and what that data represents. So we'll get right into it. Here's going to be some of the key topics I'm going to talk about. What constitutes a breach? I'm going to give you the kind of the legal accepted definition. We're going to talk about compliance because compliance is very applicable to this entire cybersecurity space. I'm going to talk a bit about the common causes and cybersecurity threats. You heard some this morning. If you went to that briefing with Dr. Wellbanks brought up, you're going to see the same things if you go to the other session with the IIG. Talk about some best practices. And I'm not just going to talk about general best practices. I'm going to talk about what schools have done this year in response to different activities. So I'm going to give you some real-world examples here. Then we'll talk about the process, how to report it, and what we do with it once you report it. And then some resources that you can look at. So our wonderful compliance slide, or breach slide, is an unauthorized disclosure, misuse, alteration, destruction, or compromise of sensitive information. What is the sensitive information? That's going to be your students' information. That's going to be your information in some cases. And that's going to be financial information. So it's the entire spectrum of personal information and financial information. I don't get into a lot of the research and development activities. That's typically not in my lane of traffic. The IG does. But that could change. That could evolve because as we've saw over the last couple of years, R&D information at universities has been a huge target. By target, I mean people trying to steal it in one form or another. So we'll talk about the other subjects quite a bit and just kind of a scope thing. When I talk about the volume of information that we have, there are 70 information systems I have direct control over, either directly deployed to one of our data centers, or we have contracted out to a third party directly supporting us. Parties you deal with every day. COD is a system, NSLDS, et cetera. FAFSA is a huge system in our data center. So those 70 systems contain all the information I talked about in that 1 year, plus all the information from the previous years. You heard we at least go back 20 years as an organization. We've got data requirements to maintain some of that data for 30 years. So you can very quickly see how that small number of records a year becomes huge. Also take into consideration, when you look at a student's record, a lot of times you're going to see the student's record, and I'm going to use Social Security numbers as an example. You'll see the student's Social Security number because it's easy for me to relate to. All right, that's fine. We understand that's protected information. But if the student has a parent, now I have the parent's information. And if I have a second parent, now I have another set of information. And what if they have a spouse, a significant other that's included in that? So I could have 4 elements of Social Security in this one student's record. So if you take that 13 million and you add in the parents and you add in everything, pretty quickly we're at 40 million different elements of information that could be breached that would require us to take actions. And we have only compromised a few records. So it's very critical that we understand the scope of this and understand what it is that we need to do. So we're going to talk about some of those things. Compliance is always something that we need to think about. The ones you see on the board here are the ones that we traditionally think about, and I'll allude to some others at the end of this. When I came on board at FSA and they started throwing all these things at me with the PPA and the SAG and the GLBA and all these other things I hadn't directly worked with because it wasn't in my typical space, it was like, so what? What does this really mean? So I'm going to explain some of these in a cybersecurity perspective so that you can understand what it is that you've signed up to do and what it is we expect you to do. Be aware that these things will change over time. We're seeing presidential executive orders. We're seeing OMB mandates that are changing the way we do business. I'll talk about a couple of those here in just a second. So the Program Participation Agreement, PPA, that's where the school agrees to use funds solely for the purpose specified. In other words, we give you $1 for this activity, you spend the dollar on that activity. You guys are much more aware of that than I am by far, I guarantee you. So that's kind of what we're pushing to. You use it the way it's supposed to be, we're good to go. If you don't, then that's when we get into other discussions with fraud or misuse or unintentional consequences for doing actions. The SAG agreement is established to allow us to integrate the state grant agencies and exchange data electronically. This is how you get the data. So when I talk about my 70 systems, those 70 systems contain this data. You make requests to a specific system, that system goes out and spider webs across to pull the data you want because it may not be in a central location and it may not even be on the same physical location. So it goes across, pulls all that data down securely, brings it down, answers your query, gives you the information that you're asking for on that particular record, that particular student activity. So this is how we do it safely. This is how you agree to do certain things and we agree to do certain things. I will say that the SAG, to me, from a cybersecurity perspective, is probably the biggest thing that we need to make sure we have right. Because while it is, you're responsible for protecting that information, both personal and financial, and you have to do certain things. And key to that is planning. How do you plan to protect the data from all the different activities associated with protecting data? And then how do you document your plan? In a recent event that was a phishing event, and someone talked phishing, we'll talk a little bit more about phishing here. The phishing, they got somebody, that somebody then went and got ransomware and it started spreading throughout the school because they were so interconnected on their network with no protective actions between it. Very quickly got over and started hitting the area where the FSA data, which is my concern, is stored. And we had to go back and figure out how to clean all that up and work in partnership with the school to clean it up. But the first question I asked is, where's your plan? How do you respond to this incident? What do you do? SAG requires you to have a plan. Document it. I highly recommend you test it. When was the last time you had your executives from your school, the deans and everybody else sit down even at a table and test the plan? Because if I came to you as an operations guy, as a cybersecurity guy from your school, and I'm saying, hey, I got to shut down all the file shares because they're getting locked. I need to do it right now. Can your executive committee let that person go forward and do that right now and understand the impact to the school? Because that's critical. What's the impact to you in operations and how you conduct your business? Because if they shut it down in one place, it may have a ripple effect across to everything, where everyone's going, oh, I can't do my work now because I can't get to my data. I lost my cell phone, didn't lose it, it went out on me today. And I'm going, I can't get to my phone list. I can't get to my data. I can't get to my email because the device I had decided didn't want to play good today and died on me. So you got to think about all those things. The SAG talks about putting a plan together, and we'll talk plans a little bit later. The one that I think, especially last year, had the biggest number of questions generated was the Graham-Leach-Biley Act, GLBA as we commonly call it, and the impacts of the GLBA. Obviously, it's a federal law. We all have to follow it, but it controls the way financial institutions and schools, all the schools are considered financial institutions, how the financial institutions do their business. It talks about, again, reinforcing things like privacy. It talks about safeguards of the financial data. So it's got a lot of pieces and parts that very quickly you can see the PPA, the SAG, the GLBA all talk about protecting stuff and then defining what it is that we're trying to protect. And that's what's critical for us, is to protect that data and that information and be able to do it in a way that still allows you to conduct business. And sometimes those don't agree. I can protect data so it'll never be compromised, but you won't get your job done. I can also let you have full access to data, but I may lose it and have risk there. So there's a balancing act in there, and we've got to figure out what the exact balancing act is for your particular institution or school or college or vocational, and it doesn't matter. You know, it could be the simple barber school that's got 5 computers total, only got like 7 or 8 employees, and I'm telling them they have to do the PPA, the SAG, the GLBA. Well, by the way, FERPA and stuff we'll talk about here in a minute. And they're going, I teach people to cut hair. I don't know. It's a computer I bought at Best Buy. I don't even know what you're talking about. My cable guy came in and put my router in and went ahead and hooked up all the computers to it. That's all I know. How can I do that? Then you've got the other side of the spectrum, and was it you that told me it's 74,000? All right, 74,000 students. Okay, now you got to figure out how to protect those 74,000 students, and your problems have just multiplied. In most cases, though, the larger schools have what we refer to a lot of times as a security operations center or a SOC team. Those are cybersecurity folks that can help you with protecting the data and help you recover if something happens. So it's very important for you to know who those folks are and be able to get across to those people and say, hey, I got an issue, I need your help, and how can we do it and still conduct business? So those are questions that, as I would sit there in your shoes, I would be asking myself, what happens if they do take it away, and how can I prevent them from taking it away? What can I do to protect this stuff more? So GLBA talks about the protection. One good thing about the relationship of these is if you comply with certain elements of the FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, it automatically also covers you under GLBA because you're doing the same things. So it's important to be able to look across these and say, am I duplicating effort? In some cases, you could be. However, in this particular case, the actual law helped us out and said, if you're doing this, you're covered for that as well. There's a couple of Dear Colleague letters in there, Gen 1518, 1612. 1612 was the follow-on to the first one. Reminds you, institutions, that third-party servicers and their requirements to protect data used across the Title IV environment. So at FSA, we use a lot of third parties for a lot of different reasons. I have cloud hosting environments that we have, where we're putting our actual applications up in the clouds for efficiency, to speed up things. My student aid, for example, sits in the cloud. It doesn't sit in our data center, traditional data center. It's up there floating around with everybody else. But we have to make sure we put in the right security mechanisms to protect those, and we've done that. As a matter of fact, we actually did some innovative things with my student aid, and we're still working some innovation, particularly around the multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, how students in the future are going to get that app to be more secure and smarter for them. And Dr. Johnson is going to talk about a lot of the things that the app is going to bring forward over the next year. And there's, again, a ton of initiatives for that. But again, those two memos reminded you to, protect the data and to report as required. Then the FERPA, the final one on the list there, basically covered a number of the same things. Talks about the records, who has rights to them, lets you make sure you protect the record and the student. If there's a problem with the record, student get it changed and updated, and that you don't release any of their records without written permission. And again, I'm simplifying these laws just to kind of give you a focus and a theme, and the theme is protecting privacy data and protecting financial data. Day to day over the last, and I'm just going to give you the last year or so, the vast majority of the issues we've seen from the schools, and these are self-reported issues that we come into us and then we go out and assist with you whenever possible in various manners. Most of it is online. The vast majority of the things have been related to that privacy information. And they're simple things that people do, and understand and we talked resources a little bit with some folks in the room here earlier. We're all stressed. We have a lot of things going on. A perfect example is you've got that staff person sitting there, they've got 20 students in front of them. All 20 students are yelling and or making noise, saying, I need my report, I need my report, I need my report. So that poor staff person sitting there busily pulling up reports while they're coming off the printer, and it's like, okay, here's a report, you asked for it. They may make a mistake, a simple mistake. I gave the wrong report to the wrong person. Tom got Billy's report. That's a breach, folks. You know, I want to know about that, because if you're doing that and someone else is doing it, but someone else has figured out how to apply some best practices, some policies, some processes, some training that can help you, I want to be able to give you that advice and say, you know, school X, typically don't talk about what school we're dealing with, but school X had a similar problem and came up with these things. Maybe you can apply it in your school or adopt parts of it. Okay, and then we can avoid the thing in the future. It goes to being a little more of the proactive stance versus the reactive stance as we go forward. But I will guarantee you, as I'm standing here, it's going to happen to every single school at one point or another. Human error is going to come into play. Let's talk about this wonderful little slide here. Oh, colors are even showing up pretty good. Some of us remember the 1980s movie, and some of you that are movie buffs, good old war games. Remember the no-win scenario that the computer went through at the end of it as it was figuring out whether or not nuclear war was viable? Boy, it looked a lot like this. This is one vendor, one commercial vendor, with their customers that have agreed to participate in a non-attributable information sharing, and they are tracking these attacks of different types. You can see there's a whole list of attacks, a whole list of countries. This is a millisecond. This is a screenshot. If you see this live, it's going like this constantly to the point where it's a blur. And when the attacks are heavy, and we've seen those, and I can tell you pretty close when your schools get out for Christmas. I can tell you when you get out for spring break, and I can tell you the end of the year, because my meter pegs goes way up on the activities that I see. Because, being good educators, you're training the students and you're training the next generation of cybersecurity folks, well, they want to practice. And they want to go out there and do some of those things that they learned about without the ethical piece behind it that says, you really don't want to attack other people. It's not a good thing to do. Because you're going to have people like me that are going to find you. Okay, we're going to figure out who you are. And we're going to go over to my good friends with the guns and badges and say, hey, they're attacking us and here's the evidence for it. And then depending on the significance, the guys with guns and badges may simply send them a letter or may show up on a doorstep, which you really don't want that to happen. And I try to avoid it as well. But I can tell. I know when it happens. And I can probably look at a school calendar and say, well, that school, big cybersecurity school, just got out 2 days ago. Students are home. This school is going to get out in a couple days. I can anticipate a spike just historically. So we see it. The importance of this is not just the commercial sector. It is the federal sector. It is all of you that are getting this every day. If you talk to your IT guys that run your firewalls, which are your first level of defense, they can probably give you some statistics on what they see at your school. I get hundreds of thousands of knocks on my door every day. Some of them are just, as we call the kiddie script type folks, who are running a script that they learned to run. It has little impact. They're just trying to see if I'm there or if they can get in easily. And then we have the adversaries that are highly skilled, highly technical, and have a large backing behind them. And we've seen that in, for example, some of the R&D areas where they got in and were successful. And the key is they only have to get in one time, but we have to keep them out every time. Again, very hard equation to work. So you can see it's not our problem alone. It's everybody's problem, and we're hoping globally to try to work the problems. And companies like this one and companies we deal with on a day-to-day in the cybersecurity business, as well as federal entities, are helping come up with new, innovative ways to help us protect ourselves. And you'll see that as we go forward a little bit. So while this is just a short list of causes and a short list of threats, and Linda Wilbanks this morning had a lot more of them, these are the ones we actually saw happen this year at schools. In 2015, when we first started keeping statistics for the schools, until March 18th of the, or excuse me, until March of this year, or excuse me, May of this year, we saw 256 reported breaches. You gave us the information. We appreciate it. Since May, we've gotten 276, just since May. Okay, again, people are getting smarter. You're reaching out. One of the things I say is that I don't want to be your adversary. Okay, I have compliance, you have compliance, let's put it aside. I want to help you. And that's what's critical to my operation, is to try to help you. I've staffed up the operation, bringing in a new federal lead for it, a government person working for me, brought in some additional contractor support so that I can respond to what you tell me. And the bottom line is, I want to hear from you. I want you to send me reports that says, hey, I think this might be a breach. I think this might be a financial thing. Let us look at it. These are cybersecurity experts I have that basically are giving you free service. Okay? Let us take a look at it. And a lot of times it'll be, well, it's one of those low-risk things that one person gave Tom and Billy the wrong data. All right, what are you going to do to correct it? You're going to probably retrain the person. You might change your business processes a little bit. You might say, okay, you need to handle one person at a time. Or you might bring an intern in to help with the overflow. So you probably, I'm going to ask you what you're doing to try to address the problem, and make some suggestions if I have any. I don't have them all by any means. But human error is going to happen. And we want to address it when it happens. I don't mind the little ones, and you shouldn't really be that afraid of reporting the little ones, because they happen every day, and we know they're going to happen. And we typically will now say, thank you very much for reporting. We'll do the analysis, and we'll go back and say, we no longer have a federal interest in this. Follow your state rules, your school rules. I'm out of your business, folks. I don't want to be in it any longer than I have to. But what concerns me are the ones where I sent I'm an administrator or somebody, I sent a Excel file with 50,000 students' social security numbers to someone else off my campus, or even someone else on my campus. I didn't encrypt the data. Therefore, anybody that opens it up can read it. And now what am I going to do? We have some suggestions on what you can do. We'll try to help you as much as possible. A lot of it's going to be communication between you and whoever you send it to. And I brought up a couple of key things there: encryption and where you send it to. A lot of schools, or some schools, have encryption internal to their systems, where you're sending encrypted email by virtue of the transport mechanism. Think of it as your water pipe. The email message is the water inside the pipe, and the pipe is protecting that water from going anywhere else. But a lot of schools don't. So understand what your school does. That helps understand the impact you may have to the action. That's one that I'll probably ask you a lot more questions on. Can you give me your plan? Do you have audit logs, technical terms, audit logs, that we can look at to see exactly where it went from space A to space B? And I'm trying to keep this simple. I know some of you, and I've talked to some of you, they're very technical. But when I start talking about IPs and MAC addresses and what was your, pretty soon everyone falls asleep on me. But I'll try to keep it at a higher level for everyone. But basically then, we can help you address what happened. At the end of it, it may be, thank you very much, go about your business, because it wasn't FSA data. The source was not FSA. Therefore, it wasn't my data. You do your state stuff. In some cases, it is FSA data, and then we will help work through that with you in a partnership. My job is to be your partner, not your enemy, and I want to try to be that every time I can. So let's get to some of these interesting ones. So ransomware. Ransomware is typically, and kind of bumps down to phishing. I'm probably out of order here. Phishing emails or phishing scenarios are, I sent someone an email because I'm a bad guy. That email looked exactly like something the school would send out, because I watched the school and I monitored what they did. And, you know, I know a student and watched him sign into his account, and I took screenshots. Looks exactly like it should. Or it doesn't look like anything. And we've seen the Bank of America ones, for example, is you got a problem with your bank account, click on this link. That's all it says. So if someone opens it, and I will tell you with phishing email, based on the particular actors and the skills of the actors, just opening the email can in fact give you problems. Typically, though, it's click on the link and I'm going to take you somewhere else. Or I'm going to ask you questions. Give me your username and your password so I can fix your account for you. Think anybody falls for that nowadays? Yeah, I definitely do. Definitely fall for that one all the time. And then some of us are technology challenged up here too. So probably the biggest phishing issue we saw this year, and I know some of you were directly involved in it, was where they went to the students with an email that was asking for that username and information. They got it, they logged into the school, and they changed the little routing code. Simple, right? No real impact. Except that all your loan money that's supposed to go to the student, federal dollars, state dollars, hits that routing code and ends up in the Bahamas or Cayman Islands or somewhere else in the world, and then disappears very quickly. Okay? This summer we had 9 institutions that reported to us that problem. Okay, the first 2 we looked at and said, send us some more so we can see and look and see what it is you're actually getting. And they gave us the email. We were able to work with our team and look at the header information and understand who the actor could be. Okay, it's always a could be in our business. You don't know for sure. But we looked to see who the actors were. We looked to see what the content was. That's what resulted in that message that got posted on IFAP, the warning about it. So we were at 2 when we started that. I think we were at, was it 4 when we actually got it posted? Karen's down here kind of keeping me straight in life here. So we hit 4 by the time we got it posted. We went up to 9 total. But once we posted it, and it was surprising, and a couple of schools got back to us, it kind of caught on like wildfire a little bit. Some schools actually sent it out to all of their students. Well, it had you contacting us if you had questions. So we got a few questions. That's fine. We got a few. We're quite prepared for that. A little lesson learned on our part in the future. Maybe we need to give you something to give to your students that's contacting someone within the school versus us. But that's fine. We took care of it. We handled it. Okay, no real issues with this. But it was exciting that the students also were sending it out to other students. Okay, that social engineering piece of or social media piece of the students sending it out to each other. And in some cases, there was one school in Texas that reported in and said, oh, I don't have any problem, but we got a phishing campaign going on. We caught it. We're blocking it. No impact to us. We're blocking with the different tools that we have to block out spam type email and this type of email. But we sent out a note to our students. Well, we found out before we ever got the note out to all the students were sending it back and forth and telling each other they were seeing ransomware. They were getting notices for it. Okay, not to open it, not to do anything with it, delete it, etc. So the students stepped forward and gave us a little assistance as well, which is good. Just since I've gone down the road here, how many people do not know what ransomware is? All right, educated group of people. I don't see a single hand out there. I'm not calling you out specifically, but some groups don't understand ransomware's impact and what ransomware really is. So I'm trying to, again, keep this at a level that I understand. And that's kind of difficult, right, Karen? The next couple of things, identity theft. Obviously, I want those credentials. You saw some statistics. There are some statistics out there. You can buy them on the dark web for $1. Some, depending on what they're for, in pennies. Others get you better access to more valuable things. And you may see those in the $5, $10, $15, $20 range. But you can go online and you can go online and buy my stuff. I'm on the dark web. You can buy all of my information, thanks to our good friends in OPM, and try to do identity theft. Try to impersonate me. A little hard for it to do it right now because of all the other safeguards that I put in place, but it happens every day. Identity theft. We want your information, not just your money, but now I got credit cards. Now I got whatever else that you may have access to. I may read your emails. I may send emails on your behalf. They get you in trouble. Okay, and it happens not just to students; it can happen to staff as well. Malware in general. Most of what we're seeing right now from schools is related to phishing. It may not be ransomware. It may be some other piece of malware. And the intent of that malware is to get a foothold in your systems and then start exfiltrating data that way. Okay, one of my systems, we had a team from Homeland Security, and these are like the cream of the cybersecurity attack guys. They came in and attacked one of our systems intentionally. It was a test environment they went after. Test environments are typically not as secure as our production environment. They were able to establish a foothold from the outside through some stuff we knew we had open, and we had it opened intentionally for test purposes, and we're able to exfiltrate some of our test data. And of course, it's like, I said, well, you try it on production, and you won't be as successful because we use tests to figure out how to secure it, and we use tests to make sure what we put in place works before we roll it to production. So it was an interesting conversation with them as they did their out brief, and we said, well, I challenge you to try it on production, and they went away. So again, you're going to see those kind of things where malware comes in even on your production networks, the things you use every day. It may come in through email. It may come in through a website someone surfed to. There's a lot of malicious websites. It may be some student took and plugged in a CD or a USB to a computer somewhere on your network. And if your network is a flat network, like a lot of networks are in the community, which flat means I can get anywhere on that network regardless of who I am, then you're going to have problems. If your network is segmented, it's a term network folks use. If it's segmented, it means I have a block here, and I have some kind of protective mechanism, a security device, a firewall, a detection activity, whatever here, and I got another one, and then maybe the students are off over here by themselves, not touching the admin networks, not touching what you work with every day, and for me, not touching the FSA data, then you're going to have a lot easier time protecting the information. And they're going to have the ability to go and do things on the student area, for example, that you wouldn't allow anywhere else in there. It's part of how we stop malware from moving. And it's really critical for things like ransomware, which goes and looks for wherever it can go to, and it tries to go there, and it tries to lock it, and of course comes back and asks you for dollars and cents. I think in general, what are we doing on time, Karen? Okay, so we'll give you plenty of time for questions. So I've talked about a lot of these things, document it. You need standard repeatable processes that your folks can run and they understand, and that everybody involved knows what to do. Talked about that executive committee. We at FSA will run exercises on occasions for some of our systems, and we'll have the executives sitting there. Mr. Manning will be at the table as we run a disaster recovery exercise tabletop. We're not actually doing it live. We're doing it on the table, talking about it with a scenario, talking about what each person's responsibilities are and each person's role is in making decisions as we go forward. That way, when it happens, we don't have to sit there and go, well, what am I supposed to do? We've already documented what you're supposed to do. Okay, do you agree with that at this particular environment? And do we need to move it left or right? But at least we have a good, solid starting point. Educate yourselves, your fellow employees, and your students. Department of Education, federal government requires one annual cybersecurity training a year for every federal employee and contractors contracted to the department. In the Department of Education, that wasn't good enough. We have 3 a year. We go through 3 different training sessions related to cybersecurity. Some of them are not long. We're talking hour and a half maybe. Some are longer than that. The big annual one, as we classify it, we actually have a half-a-day course that that we teach sometimes, or they can go online and take it, and it takes about 3 hours. The other two are targeted. So when we're seeing issues with our systems or our user behavior, we will build a targeted training session for that year. Last year, for example, phishing is always a big problem, so we had a phishing training session on top of phishing being covered in the main annual one. So we had a phishing focused on phishing with some real live examples that we'd seen on our networks. We included some of the stuff that I talked about earlier on how to identify it, what to do with it. And we also talked about what it is that we as an organization would respond to it a little bit. So again, 3 trainings a year. We think it's that important. There is some discussion. We might even go to 4 trainings a year just because we love to train. But a lot of training is available to you to do. A lot of it is free. If you go out there and look at Carnegie Mellon, if you look at Homeland Security, if you look at the FBI sites, they all have training. And I've seen some excellent training from your counterparts as well that they have posted up there and made available to the community. So I recommend you take advantage of that and periodically train specifically your employees, specifically on how to handle privacy information and the financial information, how to protect it, how not to inadvertently disclose it, and then how to report it if something happens. And we always want to close that loop on reporting it so that everyone's aware of it. It does no one any good if you try to hide it and it comes up later and just makes you look worse. I'd rather have something up front we know about, we're working, and then when it pops up somewhere else, we're going, we're already a month into that thing, and here's what we've done. Okay, that's the best bet, and that's happened. That's happened. It showed up in a newspaper. You know, they came running down from the 11th floor, which is where our executives sat, and said, hey, do you know anything about this? Yeah, we're past that point. We dealt with the school, and here's what we did, A, B, C, and D, and we're basically waiting for them to finish up their activities. So it's better to report it than for us to find out about it in some of their channels, particularly if it shows up in the guys with the guns and badges area, which sometimes they don't give us the leeway to get back and work with you guys. So I'd rather work with you up front. Report's important. I already talked about segregating your networks. If I had my way, every school would have an FSA enclave, and I would know exactly how that enclave is configured, right down to the specific dots on the I's and the specific configuration of every security component protecting that environment. But I don't always have my way. That's your responsibility. I can make recommendations. I can have your teams do stuff, but network segmentation, which is segregation, is a very, very effective means to stop a lot of what we're seeing. Password practices, make them long, make them strong. You hear that all the time. What's most important is to use them and use them right. And if at all possible, transition to some kind of two-factor authentication. A lot of you in here have, and I have one too, this little red token FSA issued to you to allow you to access the system. That's part of two-factor authentication. I have like 6 of these I do for my business. Go ahead and do two-factor authentication. One school that had a ransomware issue, we had a lot of protective mechanisms in. We had like 2,000 students plus targeted. It got through to 700 of those 2,000. So we're, kind of effective. We need to do some changes. Got through to the 700. Of the 701, clicked on it. Clicked on the link, brought the ransomware down, and it started to do its thing. The security team detected it, but because they were protected, they had software running on their computers that would stop it, antivirus type stuff, anti-malware. They had network segmentation. The ransomware only affected a few computers. And they were laptops that somehow missed a patch. They went back, they scrubbed them all, they got their patches back up, they made sure that they were in their patch cycle. They also did something I thought was extremely smart. 7,000 students total is their population, and they went out and two-factor authentication for every single student, which means they had to have that token. It could be something that comes in on your cell phone. You know, you start transacting, and your bank sends you a number, and you have to go with that number back and forth. It could be something like that. It could be a soft certificate you have on here that you can use to enter code. It could be the hard token. They did two-factor authentication for all 700 students or 7,000 students, and they don't expect that problem to happen again. Because if they do it, it typically requires that two-factor, that last piece of the puzzle, before you can go further. So that's very effective. And they're changing their technology to match that and further enable that through their applications. Install anti-malware software. I think antivirus products have been around since computers almost. I think I saw my first one back in the early 80s. Make sure it's there. If you got Windows 10, it's on there, it's free. A lot of schools are taking advantage of that. Make sure it's up and running, it's updated. If you don't, and if you do remote logins, for example, your telework community, your school allows you to come in through VPNs, virtual private networks, or access points, or whatever the case may be, go ahead and make sure yours is up to date as well. And then I already talked to use the multi-factor authentication devices and activities, so you should be good there. So I talked about a lot of other things going on. I talked about some of the things we have seen over the last year. Here's probably what to me would be the easiest thing, is how do you report it? And one question we've received several times is, well, what do I have to report? You know, I'll take any report you give me. And if it's not my business, it's not FSA data, I'll say, thank you very much. I will probably use it for trend information. It's great when a school sends me a note and says, hey, I got ransomware on my main system. We were able to block it, and here's the technology we've deployed to do it. Great. I have a best practice now. Okay, but now I also have another school that's a ransomware attack. And I'll probably ask them, can you give me some evidence? Give me what you saw, so I can see if it's the same attack mechanism. You know, was it that very well-crafted email that looked like it came from the school and had all the right things from the school, the logo? There weren't the classic things we talk about when we talk about phishing email. Everything spelled right. It looks very professional. You think it came from your school. Your alma mater is trying to help you out here. Really didn't. But we can see that, and we can get some information off that, and we can help get the word out to everybody else. And that's one of the items that we're talking about more and more, is how to communicate things back out. But it also then lets me look at where the problem space is, so that if we don't have a training available to the community, maybe I can go to either the Department of Education, FSA, Department of Education, or to someone else like Carnegie Mellon and say, hey, I'm seeing this at schools. Can you develop me a training package that we can then make available to them? So I become your advocate for additional things to help you out. And I want to become your advocate. So if you're going to report an incident, send it to us in an email. The first email address is new this year. That goes directly to a team of cybersecurity folks. Part of that team is the Department of Education Security Operations Center, the EDSOC. The EDSOC operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so they'll get that email. It also goes to my cybersecurity folks at FSA. We typically will be the ones that follow up with you and make sure that your information is being processed. We'll ask you the questions. We'll work with you. The EDSOC typically is the intake agent, the help desk type of folks. They'll look at it very quickly. I have gotten calls in the middle of the night for some of these things. That's fine. That's what I get paid for. But report it. I want you to report it. I want you to report everything. We'll tell you. We'll come back to you. Yeah, it's important. No, it's not important. Or not our business. CPS, sag@ed.gov, an address you're probably very familiar with. Send it to both places. They do some other statistical stuff as well. Copy whoever your policy says is supposed to be copied. If it says the dean for this department, the dean for that department, and the president of the school are supposed to be copied, copy them. Let them know what you're doing. You can also call it in. The EDSOC, again, is 24 hours a day. What we need to know is who, what, when, where, why, how. Date of the breach, impact, if you know it, number of records. How did it happen? It was a phishing email. Who is the techie that we can talk to? I like to talk to the techies because we ask a lot of technical questions. What have you done to remediate it? And what else do we need to do? So the emphasis here is go ahead and report it. What do we do with it? Well, we're going to get the report from you guys. Postsecondary institutions is the overarching term we use for you. We're going to get it out of the media. We'll get it from the IG. We might get something from the FBI through the IG. We might get it from Homeland Security on a secure side. Threat information they saw somewhere out on the dark web they thought we needed to be aware of. We get it from a lot of places. We try to work with you as we get it. We'll take a look at it, determine if there's any impact to FSA data and severity of that impact. Yeah, again, unlikely. That's that one person, immediate corrective action. You took it back away from them and said, don't remember any of that stuff. We'll probably close it very quickly. If it has an impact, probably going to take a little bit longer, maybe days, maybe weeks, and in some cases, maybe months because of a severe impact. And we're going to ask for more stuff. We want to look at things. I have professionals that can do this, help you out whenever possible. Okay, before I talk about resources, there's one thing that I actually missed in the conversation. What happens when you get that compromise? You don't meet the requirements we lay out for you to protect the data. You violated all of those policies that we saw. And a decision is made by FSA to turn off your access to Title IV. It's happened. It's happened 3 times in the last 2 years. Okay? It's the hammer. I don't like using the hammer. We haven't used the hammer since it's been over a year. I'd rather work with you up front, get these things solved. But when we use that hammer, it's imperative that we start working together. One of those schools languished for almost 2 years. We just got them access back because we went out and helped them do an assessment and helped them fix some problems to get FSA data again. We have a short-term and a long-term plan with the school. They did the short-term actions. We gave them access back to the data so they could process this fall. Long-term, they have a plan. They're going to start doing things. As a matter of fact, we have a check-in with them in just a few days to make sure that they are doing what they agreed to do. The other 2 schools, similar actions. They fixed the problems to our satisfaction. We went back and got them turned on. I'd rather not wait till the hammer comes out. I'd rather talk to you guys when we're just talking about, well, you know, there are some nails, but we don't have anything to hit it with, and we don't want to hit it. So do yourself a favor and a favor. Report it. We'll help you get through it. We'll help you come up with some ideas on how things you can do to continue to get the FSA data. We're here for you. We're here for the students. All right, some resources you can use. If your team wants to do a self-assessment based on some based on the Federal Financial Institution Examiners Council, we have a file there that will help you walk through your self-assessment. We have a lot of things on the Cybersecurity Compliance page on IFAP. And our privacy advocates have quite a bit of information on their page as well. They have some training there, some videos, some webinars. Please take advantage of all of that. And I got 8 seconds left. Wow, that won't ever happen again. All right, so I think overall, well, we're going to start opening questions here, but I'm here to help, and that is the truth. So if you need help, let us know. You can get us at that email. The reason we use the email is I have lots of people that can check that and get back to you fairly quickly. If you send it to Dan Commons, as Karen can tell you, I may not see that because, like a lot of you, I get thousands of emails every day from everybody that's my friend, from every vendor out there, and my filter list is about yay long of people I filter off just to give me a chance to do the real work. So Karen's learned to just come to me, tap me on the head and say, go to this email and take care of it. But that email address eliminates that problem. It's monitored by the team. Not only do I have it monitored by the EDSOC, there's a Security Operations Center within FSA that monitors it Monday through Friday. And I actually have the IHE team, which is the Institution of Higher Education, my cybersecurity team dedicated to the IHEs. They also check it Monday through Friday. And again, people do call me in the middle of the night on it. So now's the time for questions. And if you use all your questions in the last session with the risk guys and I answered them, that's fine. If not, I'd like questions. All right. Let her bring over the mic.
I don't know if
Some of these sessions are being recorded just for being able to get them back out and enable folks that did not attend to be able to see what's going on. So by all means, use the mic, please.
I actually have two questions. We rarely see law enforcement agencies prosecuting perpetrators of phishing, scam, and spam emails. Will the department, if they can find the mastermind, or is anyone looking for the mastermind?
I can't get into everything the law enforcement guys are doing. I'm not done yet. Here, hold with me here. But I will tell you that a couple of the recent FBI cases where they actually went after people, our OIG was instrumental to assist them in gathering the necessary things to do that. So yes, we are going after them hard.
Excellent.
Okay, I don't see it a lot. The IG, who by all means attend their session, they'll talk about it. That's their job, and they do it kind of in a law enforcement fenced off area, so I don't see it. Sometimes I'll see at the end of it when they come back and says, read this article. Kind of important. I will tell you internally when we have issues, the OIG is right there with us. And thankfully, knock on wood, we haven't had to prosecute any FSA folks for mishandlement, but you know, it could be an insider that got in through phishing or something. We try to identify them. A lot of times we'll turn over what we call our case to the IG, and we'll ask the IG if they want to take it forward because it may have an element of fraud in it, which is really where they're focused. Sometimes they take them, sometimes they don't. And then when they take them, I may not know what the results are for a year, depending on what it is.
Thank you. My other question is about masked IP addresses. Is there a solution?
Isn't that what you asked in the last session?
No,
Oh.
that was a different one.
So say it again, please.
Masked IP addresses, where what we're saying is the IP address will go to a country, and then that will be a different IP address, which then goes to yet another country, and it will go through about 3 or 4, so you never know where it actually started.
That's a difficult problem. One of the things that we're seeing, there's something called Tor, which is an anonymizing service. We're actively looking at Tor sites because we're faced with the same problem. We're getting Tor attempts to come into the department, so we're looking to see what we can find out. We are working with the intelligence community, with Homeland Security, law enforcement agencies to try to trace those out. We have some guys at 3-letter agencies that are dedicated to help the federal government find those things. Beyond that, I really can't get into a lot of the other things. I'll tell you, we mask a lot of our IPs. You'll see our front border IP. You won't see the internal IP. And that's to protect ourselves. But we're seeing, you know, what you're probably seeing is similar to Tor-type traffic, where it hops and hops and hops and hops, picks up a different IP every time it goes around.
Correct.
It's a big problem across the entire community.
Thank you.
Got a couple over to the left.
I'm coming. And if you're up in the balcony, just use your cheerleader voice.
Yeah, I was
Just
going
let
to
us
say.
know.
With the lights, I can hardly see up in the balcony.
Thank you. Do you have any advice for a hospital-based school where the compliance officer and the techie guys would advise a person that there was no breach?
So I think a lot of what I talked about, and a lot of what we see is similar. So we've dealt with, because we do have some HIPAA requirements as well. So we've dealt with some of the HIPAA things and some of the universities that have medical schools. It's a little bit different of an animal just because of what HIPAA says we have to do. Again, I think it's cooperation and communication. The IT teams, the techie teams, have got to work hand in hand with the folks that monitor and manage the HIPAA requirements to make sure we don't violate those, and then figure out if we did violate them, how did we violate them, and how can we recover. It's a sticky wicket. I don't think I have a really good answer for how you can crack that nut.
No, I think you misunderstood my question
Oh.
possibly. So the hospital received a ransomware,
Okay?
and I was told that the school information was not breached. Would you still have advised me to?
Okay, so, and I'm sorry, it's just because the mic isn't very loud, but, so the medical side got a ransomware, and you on the school side were told it wasn't your problem?
That
No
she was told
breach.
no breach.
No breach. I wonder what a HIPAA has to say to that. I think I understand the school. It wasn't right by any means. It should have been followed up with by, one of your state organizations. If we find out, for example, you tell us that they had a ransomware breach and they were locking everything, medical devices, whatever the case may be, my concern from a federal perspective is it my data? If they don't have access to any of my data, and I do have medical data as well, if they don't have access to any of my data, legally, I'm stopped from doing stuff. But from a state perspective and from a school perspective, obviously, you should actually really pursue that. Because that ransomware, while impacting that particular medical side of the house, may in fact transit, because I'll bet you there's HR commonalities between the school and the medical center. There are administrative commonalities. There might or might not be shared email servers. There might or might not. So an impact to one portion of your network could impact the entire network. And my assumption only is there's probably some tie-in between them. And so you definitely could be impacted as well. So again, I would serve as a forcing function and say, hey, did one of these elements as prescribed by law anywhere inside of that ransomware? If it was, what was the original source of that data? If it was the state, if it was the patient, then you deal with it on a state level. But if it came from the federal side, then we have to deal with it on the federal side. In this case, I think it's, from what I understood, reading some other things, I don't know that I can make a clear determination where the data came from.
Thank you. With having an executive team in place to develop a plan for like the disasters and breaches,
Excuse me for a second. Is the audio guy up there? Can we get the mics turned up a little bit louder, please?
yeah,
Maybe that's I just talk loud.
it could be me. Is that better?
All right.
There you go. With having just your executive team in place to develop a plan for your breaches and things like that, do you recommend for auditing purposes also developing who's handling what process at the school level, or do you just need to know that we have a plan in place to approach it?
I think your plan should be as detailed as possible. So when we do a disaster recovery or a response to an incident plan, and we have both plans, we say that you need to do this. Okay, we go down to that kind of a detail. So I recommend your plan be as detailed as possible, and then maybe you have a more strategic piece up front, and then you have the details attached to it as you go forward. But I recommend that anyone that has a role, you define the role and what their expectations and what they're going to do. Because you're really, at the end of this, is someone has to own the decision, especially if you cut off services. Someone has to own it. Who has that authority in your organization to own that? And that person is the one that should probably be on the hook to make that decision, because that's going to impact everything you do. Okay, are we, just got another minute or so. Any more questions? You are a quiet group. You're going to ambush me tomorrow, right, in my room? Yeah, okay. All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate your attendance. You guys have a good conference.